We are excited to have you tonight with us. My name is Michael Rouse, and we are so excited to have tonight's special guest speaker, Dr. Michael Harkness, who's a physician at Nemours. And tonight we're going to be speaking about smart summer safety. And we have a wonderful agenda that's lined up for you tonight. But just a couple things about tonight's session, and that is you can see us, but we cannot see you. You're on mute right now, so please use the Q&A box to ask any questions that you might have. Share your questions as they arise. We will do our best to address as many questions as time allows. And this presentation is being recorded and will be emailed to all of our enrolled families after tonight's event. And as I mentioned, we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Michael Harkness, who has joined us tonight. Welcome, Doctor. We're so proud to have you on board here. And just to give everybody a little bit of a background information on Dr. Harkness, he's a general pediatrician at the Paoli office of Nemours Outpatient Pediatrics. He has been a general pediatrician for over 35 years and enjoys working with parents to help their children grow up to be their best selves. He has a special interest in sports medicine and child development. He also has a passion for teaching medical students how to care for children of all ages. So we're very excited about having you tonight, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us. Just to introduce everyone to our agenda tonight, we're going to be speaking about summer safety, the importance of swimming and water safety, sun safety, heat safety, the environmental safety side, and the play hazards, and with our Q&A. And since we are in the throes of an amazing summer that has had some extreme heat, I think tonight's session will be phenomenal because we're going to hear from one of the best pediatricians in the area all about that. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Harkness, and he'll take it away from here. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate it. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And yes, welcome everybody. I do want to go through and go through a couple of things about summer safety that I see a lot in my years in practice, and I want to help you to be able to keep your kids as safe as possible through the summer. I purposely didn't put a whole lot of slides in because I would like to keep it open for a lot of questions at the end. And I'm sure you do have questions, so please feel free to ask any of them that come up. So when you think of summer, the first thing I want to talk about is water safety. And if we go to the next slide, swimming, one of the best sports for kids, one of the greatest sports out there. It's a sport you can do all your life. It's a wonderful way for kids to get exercise, get them out in the fresh air, keep them away from the screens and the iPads. Kids are really kind of drawn to water. They really love water. And most kids, even in the early kids, early in life, really love to get in the water very early. And it's good to get them in. I like to have parents bring their kids in the pool or in the bathtubs and things early in their lives, get them used to being around water. Kids can start swimming lessons actually as early as about 12 months old. Now, that's not the same as the infant lessons I'm going to mention in a minute, but a lot of kids will do swimming lessons as early as 12 months of age. And almost all children can learn how to swim by the time they're 4. They can learn how to float and tread water. They can find an exit point in the pool, and they can often swim basic strokes by the time they're 6. And if you ever go to a summer swim meet, which I'm sure a lot of you have been to, it's amazing to watch the 6-year-olds paddle their little legs all the way across the pool. But they actually do really well with that. So next slide, please. It's especially true for kids with special needs. So I often talk to my parents of kids who have cerebral palsy or have autism or other developmental delays. Swimming is a great sport for them to get into. The buoyancy of the water really helps them with their muscle strength and with their flexibility. They can do a lot of things in the pool that they can't do on land. It's important to have them comfortable with the water because kids with autism and developmental delay seem to be especially drawn to water and really are very high risk for drowning because they're attracted to water, but they don't have a lot of sensibility or safety first in their mind. So you have to be really careful with them around any kind of body of water. So I do really love swimming. I do love water. Now, water safety. Having said that, drowning is the #1 cause of death in children from 1 to 4. It's a really scary thing. And it's not in pools most of the time. Most of the time it's in places where kids are not supposed to be. So they wandered off They're drowning in buckets, they're drowning in ponds, they're drowning in wading pools, they're drowning in all kinds of bodies of water. I can't tell you, I mean, I've unfortunately had a few tragedies in my years as a pediatrician. And the first thing I always hear is, I just turned around for a second. I just didn't think they were there. I just don't know how they got out. So you do have to be really careful about water safety. The most important thing, there's two things that are the most important about water safety. The first one is constant supervision. And I know this sounds easy, but again, the number of parents who said, I just turned to pick up my phone, I just went to flip the burgers on the grill, and I turned around and he wasn't there, or she wasn't there. So you want to make sure that if you have kids who are not swimming, they can't swim 25 feet in the pool, you have to be within about 10 feet of those kids at all time. And you have to have your full attention to those kids. You can't be concentrating on your phone or cooking. You can't be drinking alcohol. You really need to pay attention. If you have a large group of kids around, take turns. Have somebody be the pool watcher, for every 10 or 15 minutes. And all that person does is watch the kids at the pool. They're not in conversations. They don't do anything. They just stay there and watch the kids in the pool or watch the kids around water. The other thing, which is probably the most important aspect of pool safety, is to make sure that all pools should have a 4-foot fence that goes all the way to the ground. It should be around all 4 sides of the pool, and it should have a good self-locking gate. Because if kids can get to a body of water, they're going to get there. And if you have a pool that doesn't have a great gate, it's even worse, because the kids will sneak in, they'll close the door, and then you don't know where they are. So make sure that the pools are always protected. You really want to make sure that they're safe. Now, I have had questions, people have asked me about infant swim lessons. And infant swim lessons are kind of those lessons you see on social media all the time, where they go in and toss the kids in the pool, and those little 6-month-olds or 7-month-olds, kind of blurp down the bottom, and then they poke up and they turn around and they swim. They are not really recommended for infant safety. I am fine with people doing swim lessons for infants if they're in the pool with them and helping them get used to the water. It's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you're going to, at the end of the swim lesson, you're going to have some stranger toss your baby in the pool fully clothed and show you how they can, turn around and swim to the edge. So it's a little nerve-wracking to see kids do infant swimming. It's okay to do, but you can't, when an infant completes a water safety class, you can't say to yourself, okay, good, now I don't have to watch them. You still have to watch them just as much for all kids until they're swimming well on their own. So the infant safety classes are good, but they're not perfect. So other parts of water safety, remember, kids can drown anywhere. They've had drownings in 5-gallon buckets. They've had drowning in ponds, wading pools. So make sure that any kind of access to water is controlled. Hot tubs, make sure they're covered. Kids can use the armbands and the floaties and all the stuff they have, the little tubes they have around them. Those are fine to use. They're not flotation devices. They're not going to keep kids from drowning. If you're going to be in a boat or on a dock or someplace where there's a large body of water, excuse me, you want to use a good life jacket approved by the U.S. Coast Guard. Now, the one in the picture here is not an approved U.S. Coast Guard jacket. This is actually a regular standard jacket, but for kids, what they have is they will have a little pad that goes right behind the neck, and that helps to keep the kid's head out of water. Kids don't really do well getting their heads out of water. So the good life jackets from the U.S. Coast Guard will actually keep that head out of water so that the kids can breathe a little bit easier. And lastly, make sure when you go to ponds and lakes, that's the time to wear that neon pink bathing suit or that neon green bathing suit, something nice and bright. When you see pictures, and you'll see pictures, there was a lot on social media this summer of, bathing suits in ponds and lakes. And, the black and the brown and the dark green bathing suits kind of get lost in the water. So if you're going to ponds and lakes, make sure that you're wearing something highly visible, that your child's wearing something highly visible so that you can always see them. So, all right, sun safety. I get a lot of questions about sun safety. Sun is great. It gives us vitamin D, but it also can cause a lot of acute and chronic problems. Sunburn, aging, skin cancer, all of those things happen. Probably I say the first part of sun protection here is clothing. I would say even before clothing, think about when you're out in the sun. So you really want to keep your kids out of direct sun for a long period of time during the worst times of the day. And that's usually from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We call it the shadow sign. If you stand out there and your shadow is shorter than you are, it's probably not a great time to spend a lot of time in direct sun. That's the big peak sun days, sun hours. If your shadow is longer than you are, much safer to be out in the sun. Oh, excuse me. Also for kids, clothing. So the wide brim hats, in addition to the fact that there's nothing cuter than a toddler in a wide brim hat. They really do help to protect them from their protect their face and their necks and their ears. Long sleeve clothing with tight fabric will help. Sunglasses are a good idea to protect the eyes against UVA and UVB. But sun protection clothing is really helpful in staying out during those peak sun hours. Sunscreen, a lot of questions and concerns about sunscreen. So I hope to kind of ease some of those, and I'm happy to take any other questions about sunscreen as well. You want a sunscreen that will protect you against UVA and UVB rays, and it should mention that somewhere on the bottle. There's two kinds of sunscreens. There are chemical sunscreens, and those usually absorb into the skin, and they turn the light from the sun's rays into heat so that the light doesn't stay there to damage the skin cells. The mineral sunscreens actually reflect sunlight off the skin. So how do you tell the difference? Well, the chemical sunscreens, when you look at the ingredients, you're going to be seeing things like oxybenzone and dioxybenzone and there was another one I had written down somewhere. There's all kinds of different chemical names. If you look for a mineral sunscreen, the mineral sunscreens are the ones that say titanium dioxide or zinc oxide. And those are usually the ones that I recommend to parents. I really like the mineral sunscreens for a lot of reasons that I mentioned here. There's no chemicals absorbed. The titanium and the zinc oxide basically just reflect the sun off the skin. There's less local reactions. There's less allergic reactions. It leaves a white coating on the skin so you can see how well you're covering. It is harder to apply. It's thicker. I hate putting my sunscreen on, but I do it because I know I need it. But it is a little thicker. Some of them do have colors that the kids get a kick out of, so they can be little purple monsters running around. But it is great to have the sunscreen. Now, next slide. The thing about sunscreen is that there's some question about SPF levels. Next slide. SPF levels, you should do a sunscreen with an SPF level of 30 or more. However, there's a lot of times when you go to the store, you feel like they're all having a race to see how high the SPF level can be. Actually, SPF 30 blocks 97% of the sun's rays. SPF 50 blocks 98% of the sun rays. So going from a 30 to a 50 to a 70, you're not blocking a whole lot more rays. So I like to get a mineral sunscreen. I get the cheapest one that smells okay and applies pretty easily. Two important things about sunscreen. Higher SPF is not as important as reapplying the sunscreen every 2 to 3 hours or after swimming or heavy sweating. So the sunscreen, you can't put it on the morning and say that's it, especially if they're going to be on the sun, they're going to be at the camps. You have to reapply that stuff every 2 to 3 hours. So you really want to make sure, even with a higher SPF, you still have to reapply it. Remember, higher SPF does not last longer than low SPF. They both last the same amount of time. So you can't say, well, I put a 70 on, so I'm staying out the whole day. You've got to reapply it pretty frequently, even if it's a higher SPF. So just reapply. Now, there's a lot of confusion about sunscreen in babies, and there's a whole folklore that you can't put sunscreen on a baby under 6 months. Actually, you can. They don't usually need it because they're not very mobile. But if you're going to be in a situation where they are going to be exposed, you can use a little bit of mineral sunscreen. I don't technically like it to get in their mouth. It's not particularly toxic, but I wouldn't want them sucking on their hands and getting a lot of sunscreen in. But certainly putting some on the face and putting some on the arms and legs if you need to is fine. After 6 months, you can use the mineral sunscreens without a problem. I also am not a big fan of insect repellents. And the insect repellent sunscreen combinations are not a good idea. Because if you're going to use insect repellents, and we'll talk about that a little later, you don't want to reapply them every 2 to 3 hours the same way you're doing with the sunscreen. So if you're forced to use an insect repellent, use a separate one than the sunscreen. And then lastly, with sunscreens, I know sprays are really fun and really easy to use, and it's much better than trying to hold a slippery toddler while you're trying to put more sunscreen on. But just be careful that it's away from the face and in a well-ventilated area. You don't want to be doing sunscreen sprays in the car. Okay. All right, next, heat safety. So yeah, this is a big one, Michael, from this year. We've had a lot of really warm temperatures. Couple of really simple, basic things to remember. Water is the best hydration fluid. So Gatorade and all the other sports drinks don't have any advantage to water in terms of hydration. They do have an advantage in that they get into the system quicker. So if you give somebody 8 ounces of water and you give somebody else 8 ounces of Gatorade and you measure how much is left in the stomach after, say, 30 minutes, there's a lot less Gatorade left in the stomach than there is water. The sports drinks do get absorbed quicker. So if you have a kid who's going out to play a sport and doing something strenuous, you may want to use a sports drink right before the activity so that it's not sloshing around in the stomach all the time. But otherwise, water is still the best drink of all. And doing nice cold water is really, they should be the top priority, which it sounds like it is in the ESF camps. Children should always have access to water during activities. They should always have free access. The days of, being at football practice and no, you can't have water till you run another lap are over. When kids need water, they should get water. Urine color, I'm sorry?
A question for you. With children being all different sizes and for adults, I've heard of, it's important to take the body weight. So if let's for instance say you're 200 pounds, I've read before, if you take your body weight of 200, you do half of that, which would be 100, and you turn that into ounces. So 100 ounces of what you would be required as an adult to drink. What is that kind of formula for kids?
It's the same formula for kids, but there's a lot of wiggle room either way. So my best sign of hydration is urine color. And we tease the kids, we tell them we want them peeing lemonade and not apple juice. So we want light yellow to clear urine. We don't want dark yellow urine. If they're peeing, now it's tough in a camp. You're going to have to make sure the kids know, because nobody's going to be watching them peeing. But at home, you want to watch your kids pee and see what they're peeing. If they're peeing really dark yellow or orangish urine, they need more fluid. And you don't have to worry too much about overhydrating kids. They'll sweat it out, they'll pee it out. But you do want to really encourage them to do fluids. They do have a thirst mechanism. I mean, you can use that somewhat as well, but you want to make sure that their urine color is relatively clear to light yellow. So that's
Dr. We've just had some extreme heat a few weeks. I know that we've been really proud, as I mentioned to you before we started, with no hydration cases because of our red flag days where we'll require kids to be drinking water every 10 minutes or keeping water logs. But when a child goes home, they have dinner, what would be your recommendation as far as how much more water to drink? Because they've been, we're trying to keep them hydrated throughout the day, but there is a moment where, the children are at home from say 3:30 to 4 o'clock till the time they go to bed at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Like how much more water should be taken in?
Well, what you want to do is figure out if they're using a water bottle at camp, you want to find out how many times they've refilled that water bottle. And if they've refilled that water bottle, say 3 times at camp, you want another 2 or 3 times at home as well. So doing the ounces is always tough because, nobody ever has a measuring cup when you need one. But if they're doing, say, three bottles worth of water at camp, and that's been going all day, they should do probably 2 to 3 more at home.
Okay, thank you.
And watch their urine and make sure that they're urinating pretty clear.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Heat exhaustion is something we hear a lot about. This is when the body has a pretty good mechanism for getting rid of heat as long as you're well hydrated. So it's pretty good, but sometimes, especially these last couple of weeks where the heat's been way up and the humidity's been way up, it's really tough sometimes for the body to get rid of heat. So if you see kids with signs of heat exhaustion, which means kind of headache, dizzy, nausea, weakness, lots of sweating, get them out of the sun, get them out of the heat, cool them off, take off shoes and socks, take off clothing, put cool compresses to the underarms, to the groin, to the chest. Just try to cool them off as quickly as you can. Now that's some, and they need to get a lot of fluid as well. Now the next slide, that's different than heat stroke. Heat stroke is when the body's defense is no longer functioning, and that is a life-threatening medical emergency. So if you see kids who are confused, losing consciousness, they usually have hot, dry skin, they're usually not sweating much, they have a very elevated body temperature, you get them out of the heat, you start cooling them, and you call 911 right away. That is a real emergency, and kids do die of heat stroke every summer. So you do want to make sure if they're not sweating and they're confused, they need 911. They need to get to medical attention right away. So, all right, environmental safety. So we're going to go through a couple of other things really quick, both fireworks and bug safety. Now, I just want to warn everybody, if you're squeamish, please close your eyes until I tell you to open them. We'll go to the next slide to talk about fireworks. Okay, so this used to be a hand until somebody tried to light a firework and it went off in their hand. And they no longer have a thumb or a first finger or a second finger or a third finger. Firework injuries, very easy to talk about firework injuries. Don't do them. They just should be left to professionals. Children should never use fireworks. Even the sparklers can get up to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's just no reason. I know everybody has a crazy Uncle Eddie who goes to South Carolina every year and buys a carload of fireworks and brings them home and shoots them off on July 4th. Please tell them to stop and don't be around them when they do it. There's just, fireworks are just a recipe for disaster. So you just want to stay away from them. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, everybody can open their eyes again. Bug safety. I don't find too much of a problem with bugs. I mean, kids do get bug bites. They're almost always really not of any kind of concern. They rarely get infected. They rarely cause any problems. They're just itchy. To help with bugs, I do try to avoid scented soaps and perfumes and hairsprays. Bugs love that stuff. I do like to take care of any stagnant water. That's a thing everybody forgets about. If you've got a bird bath somewhere, if you've got something around, be careful with the stagnant water there and either empty it or at least change it frequently so that you're not hatching, mosquitoes and things from the stagnant water. It is okay to use bug spray in kids. The only one that's really effective are the ones that have DEET, D-E-E-T. It's diethyl something, toluamide, metadine. I used to know the answer. I don't usually apply it to the kids. If you're going somewhere, this is usually for people that are going to the tropics, that are going to a foreign country. I usually, if I'm going to use it, apply it to the clothes and not to the kids. And I only do it once until they get washed again. So I don't like to reapply bug spray. For ticks, everybody worries about ticks in this area. Tucking the pants into the socks really helps. Doing tick checks after you're out. Ticks are actually, the ticks we're worried about, the sesame seed size ticks are the dog ticks. They're not really of concern. It's the poppy seed size. So if you look at the size of these ticks, the nymph tick, which is the second one from the right, that's the one that usually spreads Lyme disease. And that's the size of a poppy seed. I have had to pull those off of kids. And if you're having trouble seeing whether there's legs or not, that's a deer tick. And that's the kind that can cause Lyme disease. They're very small, and they can spread disease. Now, they have to be on the skin for about 24 hours before they can spread the disease. So if you're doing tick checks every day, for most kids, you're going to find them. But again, they're really small, and we do see a lot of Lyme disease in the office. We go to the next slide. If you see a tick, this is something I have all the time. I find people doing this wrong. If you want to remove a tick, there's all kinds of different devices, but a good old pair of good tweezers is your best. You grab the tick as close to the head as you can, as close to the skin as you can, and you pull up and out. You might actually take a little piece of skin with you. That's okay. If you pull out and the head stays in, please don't pull out the needles and the matches and the knives and everything to try and dig the head out. The head itself is not going to be a problem, and you're going to cause a lot more trauma and a lot more risk of Lyme disease by tearing up that skin trying to get it out. So wash it with soap and water, cover it with an antibacterial ointment, put a Band-Aid on it, and just leave it be. It should be fine. Ticks, it's funny with Lyme disease. I was talking about our medical student about this today. When you go on the web and look for what a Lyme disease rash looks like, the one on the left is like the first 20 that you find in Google Images. We never see that in the office. We never see the bullseyes. I mean, I think for every bullseye that I see 20 or 30 kids with the rash on the right. This is a child who has Lyme disease. It was a tick behind her ear. And what Lyme disease rashes usually look like is they're usually red on the outside. They're very subtle. They're very light. They're red on the outside. They kind of turn purplish towards the middle, but they're very light and they grow. So if you're not sure it's a Lyme disease rash, mark it with a marker, see what it looks like tomorrow. If it's grown, it's probably Lyme disease. Lyme disease is relatively easy to treat. Let your doctors know if you see it. It's not anything to panic over, but look for those really light rashes. Sometimes we'll have to have a kid take off their shirt and walk across the room and you look from far away and say, oh yeah, there is a little rash there, but they're very subtle. So you want to keep that in mind if you're looking for Lyme disease.
Doctor, question came up with the use of hydrogen peroxide when dealing with a tick. Do you put it on before? Do you put before you pull it off? Do you put it on after? And is hydrogen peroxide something to use?
Now, tick removal is kind of like hiccups. Everybody kind of has their method that they like to use. There are people that try and put nail polish on them. There's people that try and put other kinds of things on them. I've not heard of hydrogen peroxide. I mean, I haven't tried it. I'm not sure that it works. I would really try to avoid the kind that we used to see down south, which was people would take a match and they would light it and then they would blow it out and stick it on the back of the tick to try and get them to back out. Number one, it doesn't work. The ticks don't back out. And number two, often your finger slips and you end up burning your child. So I don't really use anything on top of the tick. I just kind of grab it as close as I can. I got a really good pair of tweezers in the office. I got a really good pair at home. And I just grab it as close as I can and up and out. So there are little things that look like credit cards that you can kind of slide under the tick. And it's got a little V in it. So the card slides under and the V kind of pulls the tick up. And I think those are okay as well. But I don't think applying anything to the outside really helps.
Another question just came up about ticks. What's the best way to check for your child? And what are the key areas?
The key areas are the scalp. So taking the head and kind of putting your hand and running through to look at the scalp as best you can. Behind the ears, inside the ears, the nape of the neck, okay, underarms, groin. I've seen a lot of ticks that end up underneath the scrotum or in the groin in kids. Down in the feet are all important ways. And it's really just a matter of just kind of looking them over as best you can, get a good light, and before they get in the tub or after they get in the tub, just kind of look them all over. You're going to miss some. I mean, I feel bad because a lot of times people come in the office with Lyme disease and they feel like, I'm so sorry, I must have missed that tick. The ticks can be on and attached for 24 hours and off, and you never know it. They're really hard to see. So don't feel guilty if you missed seeing a tick. They're really hard, but it is worthwhile to at least take a look.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Playground safety, really quick. We're almost to the end here, so we get to questions. Playground safety. Next slide. Playgrounds, bikes and scooters and skateboards. You always want to wear a helmet. I think everybody knows that. Every ride, no matter what, I've seen kids get a concussion in their own driveway. I've seen a kid get a concussion at a Walmart when they was trying out a bike. So helmet, every time your butt's on the bike seat, you got to wear your helmet. The other thing is shoes. As we get to summertime, everybody kind of jumps on their bike with their bare feet or their flip-flops and runs out. And that's a really bad thing to do because you can get spoke injuries in the feet, which can be really devastating injuries. So you want to make sure if your kids are riding their bikes, make sure they have shoes on. I don't care if they wear socks, but make sure they have shoes on. And you want something that kind of covers the feet. You want to ride in safe areas. Be real careful with driveways emptying out into the street. That can be a problem. And be careful with the bike and the helmet fit for your child. You want to make sure that you've got something that really fits them. So, bringing your bike to a bike shop, most bike shops will say, yeah, this is a good size for your child, or this is not. But if you find a good bike shop, by the way, is just worth its weight in gold, because they can help you with all kinds of things with your bike and with sizing and getting the kids the right size bikes. And next, playgrounds, common sense. I mean, we've all done playgrounds. We've all hung upside down by our legs. I mean, for me, it was about 60 years ago, but we all did it once before. Just common sense. That's kind of similar to what we say about pools, and that is somebody should at least be watching. Kids are going to fall, they're going to have injuries and stuff. But if you're on good playground equipment, if you're on a soft surface, which most playgrounds should be, you have to watch for metal slides and other equipments for the heat buildup that they get. Be very careful about letting kids hang ropes over playground equipment, because there have been a number of kids that have strangled from getting caught in the ropes around the equipment. You just want the regular equipment there. Most playground equipment now that's out that I've seen is actually pretty safe and it's pretty good. But you do want somebody there watching the kids, not necessarily reading or talking on the phone, somebody who's really just watching the kids. And quite frankly, get out there and play with them. That's what the kids like most of all, is just play with them. So trampolines, I will probably get roasted for this. No pediatrician really likes trampolines. Every parent likes them because it gets a kid out of the house and off the iPad. But we've all had kids who have had neck fractures and neck injuries and things from trampolines. So be really careful and really watchful when you're on the trampoline. It should be one person at a time. They should be doing flips when they're comfortable doing flips and they can do it. No horsing around with the trampoline. They can be a pretty dangerous piece of equipment. So, well, I went a little bit over time, but hopefully that was all helpful, and I'm happy to take as many questions as everybody has.
Thank you, doctor. We have several.
Okay.
First, I also want to make sure families know that as a great reference, you can go to healthychildren.org for all this great information. Also, nemours.org and kidshealth.org are incredible reference tools for families to be able to get the best practices, especially great partners at Nemours.
And if you have questions on sunscreen, the American Academy of Dermatology has a lot of information about sunscreens. So if you have any question about sunscreen, that's a good place to go as well.
We have a few questions tonight, Doctor, that I think you're the perfect person to answer. The first is centered around, my child is 6 years old. We are trying out for soccer. Soccer is his first sport. We are being approached with different options, being the fact that we can actually do this soccer program year round. What are your thoughts on one sport development year round versus multi-sport?
I prefer multi-sport development all the time for kids prior to high school. So I think in high school, if kids want to specialize, I think that's fine. But before then, I think as much multi-sport as you can is the best. I'm amazed sometimes when I see the soccer shots, the 2 and 3 year olds who are out playing soccer. It's really cute to see, but quite frankly, just get all the parents together, throw a soccer ball in the middle, let the kids play. They'll figure it out. Free play is really important for kids. The younger they are, the more important free play is. So having a soccer program, especially if it's something that you can do with them, you can be there with them, you can play with them, that's the most important thing. Kids want to play with you and they want to play with other kids. They're not interested in being the next Messi or whoever used to be Pele in my day. Now I think it's Messi. But the kids aren't interested in being that. Don't put your 6-year-old in soccer so that he'll get a college, scholarship. You put him in because he likes it and he's having fun, and make sure they're having lots of fun. But I would try all different sports the younger they are.
I agree, Doctor. We've had some incredible doctors on webinars from Nemours, and there's something to be said about the power of play, allowing kids to have that power of play, just have fun versus getting into that skill development. That comes naturally over time, and the multi-sport approach is definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Another question came up on sunblock tips. A little bit more detail on the mineral versus the other option, and with the zinc and the titanium, are there any brands that you would recommend?
I don't work for any of them, so I don't make any money off any of them. I have, I actually have a list of some sunscreens that I use in my exam rooms. I don't have it here with me. I have used Blue Lizard a lot myself. I found that's a little bit easier to use. Their 30 and their 50 are both very nice. Neutrogena as a mineral sunscreen. To find a mineral sunscreen, it's like I said, it's going to say mineral sunscreen on it, and you're going to see either zinc oxide or titanium dioxide, and those are what you want. You want the zinc or the titanium. But yeah, there's several brands out there that I like. You want to try, anytime you can try one in a small container and see what it's like. In terms of buying large amounts of sunscreen, remember, if you're using it properly, you're going to go through a bottle of sunscreen pretty quickly. You can use a half an ounce of sunscreen on a child, on a 6-year-old. That will take a half an ounce. An adult will take an ounce. So that 16-ounce bottle of sunscreen may only last you a weekend if you're reapplying it right. So you can try different ones and see how you like them. They are expensive, unfortunately, but the sales and the Amazon and Costco and everything else can help you with that. But yeah, trying different ones. I say Blue Lizard, like I said, just because I've used it. My wife has used Neutrogena. I think Banana Boat also has a really good mineral sunscreen, but I'm not sure on that one.
Doctor, on the same sunscreen topic, a parent just raised a great question. Is any tricks to getting your child to actually use sunscreen?
It is almost impossible to get an adolescent to start using sunscreen. Okay. So the answer is you don't start at adolescence. You got to start when they're younger. They have to get into the mood. And when the kids are 2 and 3 and you say, do you want to go out and play? Of course, they want to go outside and play. Okay. Then we have to use the sunscreen. And if they fight you, you say, okay, then we won't go out and play. And you put your sunscreen on. Parents have to put it on as well. That's another thing. Is a lot of times I see the parents wrestling with the kids for the sunscreen. And then when it's time for the parents to go out, the kids are like, well, where's your sunscreen? No, daddy doesn't need it. He's an adult. Yeah, you do. And, the more you use the sunscreen, which will help your skin, the more likely the kids are going to use the sunscreen as well. So being a good example, using it consistently, using one, anything that has any kind of fun with it. Like I said, the colors sometimes will help. And it doesn't have to be a big ordeal. It's a quick on your hands, on there as best you can, rubbing it a little bit. It'll soak in over a few minutes. But getting it on there is the best.
Doctor, it reminds me of when I was younger, I was in South America and I fried that day and it was not great. And I remember the family I was staying with said to me, and the father had a very fair skin as well. And he said, let me tell you a tip. Every morning when you wake up, he's like, I'm the same way. I will put sunscreen on before I leave the bathroom. And it's almost like a daily ritual. And so it might be something for parents to realize, like, hey, make that part of your children's routine. First thing when they get out of bed after they've washed up and brushed their teeth, put the sunblock. It's a great way
before breakfast. Yeah. It's a good idea. Yeah. Now, the mineral sunscreens, you don't have to wait. Chemical sunscreens, you do have to wait about 20 minutes for them to work. But the mineral ones you can put on right before, but putting it on earlier is fine.
Great. Thank you. Our next question is really coming back to the pool. And these are, you mentioned about kids with CP and autism, but also the question was, is the pool a great place for my child just to chill out in a way where they may be having a frustrated weekend, and is the pool a calming place for my child? The parent didn't say whether their child was on the spectrum or not, so I'm assuming for any type of child, tell the benefits of a pool.
For most kids, it is. It depends a little bit on how the kids feel about water. If the kids have been raised swimming when they were younger, and they find it enjoyable, and especially if you can be there with them for the younger kids or kids with special needs, yes, it is a good place for them to chill out. Again, they still need the supervision. They still need you to be there, but yes, the pool is a great place to chill out. It's using less energy. You're buoyant. You can move a little easier. It is a great place, I think, for kids to chill out. And there's something about the cool water that just really does help. So yes, pools I think are a great place for kids to chill out with the proper supervision.
We have another question from a parent who basically said, I have a child who really has no fear of water despite no swimming skills yet, no swimming exposure yet. What's the first thing that one should do to teach a young child to begin swimming?
Well, depending on the age, the first thing I would do is try to get them into swimming lessons and try to get them into with a teacher who knows how to help them handle themselves in the water. So that would certainly help. And those kids, yeah, the kids with no fear are the ones, they're our nightmares. And you just got to be there every kind of minute and be with them. But the more you can be with them and the more you can get them into swim lessons and things, the better off they're going to be. It's still a great place for them to go. The kids who are a terror when they're in the water tend to also be a terror outside the water too. And sometimes the water at least slows them down a little bit. But I think it's a great place for them to be. And I think the swimming lessons are a good idea for that.
And Doctor, we've actually, for kids who are not quite 3 yet, who are not in our program, we've also recommended to parents who want to start earlier. It's really important for them, for their child to understand what a life vest is, and there's
Yes.
The swimmies and things like that, and to be with their children to show them what it is with it on and what it is without it on, so that they understand. I don't want to ever be here without this on me.
Yeah.
You recommend that as well?
I do. Yeah, I do. I do like the vest in kids. I think if you're right there with them, they don't need the vest. I think when you're in a place like a dock or a boat where if they could possibly go in the water without you being right there, being able to extract them, then I think it's really essential for them to have a life vest on. And I would never put a kid in a boat without a life vest. But in the pool, I think the life vest does help them to get a little bit of their, quote, water wings, where they get a little more comfortable with being in the water and being able to move around in the water. But again, being right there with them is really the most helpful thing. So, and yes, trying to, showing them what it's like without and with, you do run the risk with the daredevils. Sometimes they'll be like, wow, without the vest seems a lot better. So you want to be careful that they don't like that a little better than with the vest. But if you get a good fitting vest, it's usually okay.
Another question in terms of hydration.
Mhm.
What are your feelings on salt tablets for kids?
They're really not necessary. They used to be something we used to use all the time in the past. They tend to be kind of irritating with kids. And there's really no evidence that they're helpful at all. Extra salt in the food or extra salty food is actually fine. And they'll get plenty of electrolytes that way. They'll get some electrolytes from sports drinks if they use sports drinks. But salt tablets is a really pretty corrosive way to get salt in through the stomach. So I don't usually recommend them.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question is, we are seeing at times kids who are starting with us where they've already gone to the nurse and we have detected lice.
Yes.
So the question is, how often should a child be bathing?
Be bathing?
Bathing, a bath or a shower at the end of every day or at the beginning of every day.
Yeah. I think for most kids, bathing every other day is usually fine. But it really depends on the kid and it depends on the time of year. I mean, I always tell kids their job, when I see 4 and 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, I always say your job is that at the end of the day, every day, your parents should say, oh my gosh, how did you get so filthy? You're a mess. So kids that go through the day on a summer day and end up dirty and sweaty, I think that's a wonderful way for kids to grow up. Get them out there, let them play, let them get all kinds of dirty. So they can really bathe as often as you need to. Most kids don't need a bath more than once every other day, but you can do it every day, and you can moisturize them after the bath too. So a bath or shower, if you're doing it every day, using a little moisturizer if the skin feels dry is fine to do. In terms of lice, you're not going to get rid of lice from bathing. You're not going to get rid of the lice from the shower or from washing your hair. But there are different lice treatments out there that you can use. And lice drive everybody crazy. They're not dangerous at all. They don't cause any disease. They don't cause any kind of a problem. They're just really unwelcome, is what we call it. So, but lice themselves are not dangerous. And you can check your kids for lice. But in the summer, you don't see as much lice passed around because people aren't wearing hats. They're not really doing a lot of games where they're head to head with people. They're not laying on the carpet at school and reading stories. So
Yeah, we're fortunate. We do the hats on top of the helmets and things like that that are disposable. So
yeah.
We definitely have seen the typical every summer and we'll let families know immediately if their child has had it or has it in the same group as well. So in terms of behaviorally, this next question is really about my child who's been eating and they're seeing over the course of the last 12 months some behavioral changes. What are your thoughts on going gluten-free for a child?
The gluten-free is for two reasons, really. One is if they have celiac disease, which is an actual disease where they have they have antibodies against gluten, and their body forms antibodies against gluten, and those kids have to be gluten-free. Now, we've learned over the last 20 or 30 years that there's a lot more celiac disease than we thought there was. When I was a resident, we used to think it was about 1 in 10,000 kids. It turns out it's about 1 in 150 to 200. So there's a lot more celiac disease than we used to think. There are also kids who don't have celiac disease, who parents really swear that when they take their kids off gluten, something good happens. Their behavior changes. They do better. Their stools get better. They're eating better. They feel better. They look better. And if that happens, it's okay. It's not bad to be on a gluten-free diet. There's plenty of other alternatives to gluten, and especially now. As I said, when I was a resident, there was no such thing as gluten-free food because nobody thought you needed it. Now there's so many gluten-free products in the supermarket that you can go gluten-free, fine. It helps if you're going to go gluten-free to have a control. And what I mean by that is have somebody else in the house and you don't tell them whether your child's gluten-free or not. So have somebody say if mom wants to do it and dad's the control, or dad wants to do it and mom's the control. When you give your kid, gluten-free foods one day, see if the control person notices a difference. Because there's a lot of placebo effect. If you know that you're putting in a lot of effort to make gluten-free food and you give it to your child, you're going to be much more likely to say, wow, he does look a lot better. He does behave a lot better. For some kids, it really is. Some kids, it really does make a difference. But you want somebody to objectively say, wow, what's different with Tommy today? He seems like he's a lot more calm. And then the next day you give him gluten and dad says, well, no, Tommy's really back to being miserable. And the next day you take it out and he says, wow, he's back to being good. There's your answer. So you can certainly try gluten-free foods like that. It doesn't help to do low gluten. It's like an allergy. It doesn't help to say, well, get some of the gluten out. If they're sensitive to gluten, they're going to sensitive to even a little bit. So you have to actually take it out of the diet. But it is worth it to try and just objectively see whether it makes a difference.
And it sounds like you can see a difference pretty quickly, doctor. It's not
Usually,
about, okay.
yeah,
Great.
most parents will tell a difference pretty quickly. And they'll certainly, if the kids are gluten sensitive and they get a little bit of gluten, they certainly see that difference very quickly. They'll let you know right away, he must have had some gluten.
What's your thoughts on dairy?
Same thing. Dairy is a very common sensitivity in infants. A lot of infants can't handle cow's milk very well. As they get older, most of those kids can handle it fine by the time they're a year of age. I see a lot less behavior issues brought about by dairy versus gluten. So the gluten-free, I think gluten-free is a reasonable thing to try. I think it gets over-tried and overdone. Dairy is a reasonable thing to try, but you're going to have a lot less success with dairy than you are with gluten.
This next question's around the diet side. This parent would like to know that their child is very interested in becoming a vegan because other children are doing it, and it's the parent is scared they won't get enough nutrients. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm not a big fan of vegan diets in kids up to adolescence. I think when adolescents are able to do are be able to sit down with a nutritionist and talk about how to get all of their proteins and all of their amino acids in a vegan diet, I think that's fine. But I think for kids under about 15 or 16, I don't think vegan diets are as good. I think vegetarian diets are great for kids. Those are fine. And as long as kids can get some animal products from either milk or eggs or cheese, they're going to get all the proteins they need. They're going to get all the amino acids they need. And, parents always say, well, you want to be a weightlifter, but you can't be vegetarian. And I remind them that, gorillas are vegetarian. So you can build muscle and still be a vegetarian. But vegan diet, you have to be a little more careful because there are some amino acids that you're only going to get or that you're mainly going to get from animal products. So vegan is a little different than vegetarian, but vegetarian, go for it. I think it's a great way to go.
This next question is also diet related, where it's asking that their child is getting lots of exposure to bad snacks and sugary drinks from others at their school. Any suggestions on how to help this parent get their child focused on a more healthy food choice?
Well, it depends on the age of the child. You're not going to be able to talk a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old into avoiding snacks if all their friends are eating snacks. That's not really going to be up to the kid. What I remind people in my practice when, I have people that come in and say, he's 5 and all he wants to eat are chicken nuggets and chips and candy and soda. And my first answer is, well, you should take his car keys away because obviously he must be buying that stuff for himself. And they always look at me sheepishly and they say, no, his mom likes it or his dad likes it. No, the kids don't have cars. They don't have money. They're limited to what you buy them to eat at home. So at home, you're in charge of what's available. If you don't want them eating chips, don't buy them. If you don't want them eating candy, don't buy them. Nobody has a God-given right to eat chips and candy. School is tougher. And school, when they're around other kids at school, it's really hard to make them different because a lot of kids, especially going through grade school, don't want to be different. They want to be the same as everybody else. And adolescents want to be the same as everybody else. So it's hard to make them different and get away with it. But what I think is interesting is when I see kids in a grade school classroom and they say, the parents will say, I'm so frustrated because every time they go in for snacks, or they go in for a birthday party, they're getting all these sugary snacks and these bad snacks. And I think there's 3 other moms that I know that are in that classroom who have complained the same amount. So maybe what you need to do is get together with the other parents or some of the other parents in the classroom and say, hey, you know what, cupcakes for a birthday, fine, that's a special occasion. Cupcakes every other day is probably not of a good idea. And let's think of some other things we can do. It's amazing when you have parties and stuff for kids. We used to have parties at the church and everybody used to always buy soda we have to get soda for the kids. And one year we said, well, why don't we just get water bottles and see what happens? And the kids loved them. They had little tiny water bottles. They all went around with their water bottles. Then nobody missed the soda. Kids will eat baby carrots sometimes. They'll eat fruit. They'll eat, those kinds of things are actually helpful snacks that you can do. But I think if you're seeing that at home, you got to clean up your own pantry. If you're seeing that at school, I would say work with the other parents to get a better ideas for snacks.
Doctor, I've got 4 little ones, and I've always said, in terms of eating lunch at school, like be careful about ever sharing, eating other people's foods and things like that, because that's where you get into bad habits, especially like torqued up on sugar, like, you don't want your children. So would you recommend that? Just try to like stay focused on what mommy and daddy packed or what you're eating, because then they won't be trying, oh, a soda for the first time or this.
Yeah.
What would you recommend on that?
It sounds good, but you know what? Kids have to have fun too. And there's something really fun about trading your lunch around. I mean, God, we still do it here. Somebody will pull something out. It's like, what's that? Oh, you want to trade this for that? Yeah, it's fun for the kids to do, and it's okay to do. Kids aren't going to get in trouble from a cupcake. They're not going to get in trouble from one bag of chips. It's really more of a pattern. And if you don't like what your kids are eating over the course of a week or so, then you really want to sit down and say, okay, how can I make small changes in the diet? The last thing you want to do is to all of a sudden throw out all the chips, all the cookies, all the candy and say, that's it. We're having kale and carrots. That's your snacks. That's all you can have. The kids will be miserable. Nobody's going to like it. So if you can take a look, sit down and go through a couple of days and write down what your kids are eating without making any changes, and then sit down and look at that list and say, okay, 6 months from now, I want them to be having a lot less of this and a lot more of that. And then you make little tiny changes. You stop buying as many cookies and as much candy and as many chips. Changes that are small enough that the kids don't even notice. And that's the best way over 5 or 6 months to get your own pantry in a little better order. And then once you get that, then quite frankly, your kids are going to have the boring snacks and nobody's going to want to trade with them anyway, but they can still try. So, but yeah, I think it's a great idea to get kind of your own snacks in. But yeah, the trading stuff at school, that's fun. Let the kids have a good time with it.
Okay, doctor. Well, we are just wrapping up here.
Mhm.
I want to thank you, doctor, for your time and for your expertise.
It's been a pleasure.
Our families, please go on to nemours.org or their site, which is thekidshealth.org, for any best practices. It's a two incredible websites with a ton of information for our families. This has been an outstanding evening. Doctor, I want to thank you. You've had several people also sending notes saying how great of a doctor you are because they know you. So we want to thank Nemours for all the great things they do for ESF and our families and our community. And Doctor, I'll let you say the last few words.
Thank you very much. Get out there and have fun. Let your kids get sweaty and dirty. Don't worry about snacks and don't worry about prizes at the end. Let them get out and get sweaty and dirty and free play as much as they can.
Doctor, thank you again. Thank you for joining us tonight, families, ESF community. And we wish you a wonderful evening. And we look forward to seeing you all at camp tomorrow. Have a great
Thank you
night.
very much for this opportunity. Bye-bye now.